Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Vishwapad Mahamsaburi Rajakacharya Ashtatar Satasi Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Thank you very much. Om Namo Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Narayanam Namaskritya Ram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, we should first offer respectful obeisances to the personality of Godhead, Lord Narayan, the Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, which is Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th canto, chapter 27, attacked by Chandaveg on the city of Puranjana. Translation and purports by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, text number 2. And we'll be reading also 3 because I am a little inept at elaborating. Saraja Mahisim Rajan Sushnatam Ruchirananam Tasvastyayanam Triptam Abhyananda Rupagatam Saraja Mahisim Rajan Sushnatam Ruchirananam Kritasvastyayanam Triptam Abhyananda Rupagatam Saraja Mahisim Rajan Sushnatam Ruchirananam Kritasvastyayanam Triptam Abhyananda Rupagatam
Saraja Mahishim Raja Sushnatam Ruchirananam Swastyayanam Triptam Abhyananda Rupagatam Saraja Mahishim Raja Sushnatam Ruchirananam Ritasvastyayanam Triptam Abhyananda Rupagatam
Saraja Mahishim Rajan Sushnatam Ruchirananam Ritasvastyayanam Triptam Abhyananda Rupagatam
Saraja Mahashim Rajan
Raja Manishim Rajan
Susnatham Dushidanam
Rushiranam
Krita Swastyayanam Kritam
Rita Swastyayanam Tritam
Abhyananda Bhagatam
Abhyananda Vipagatam
Word meaning. Saha,
Saha
he,
He
Raja,
Raja
the king.
the King
Mahishim,
Manishim
the queen.
the Queen
Rajan,
Rajan
O king.
O King
Susnatam,
Susnatam
nicely bathed.
nicely bathed
Ruchira ananam,
Rushiranam
attractive face.
attractive face
Kritasvastiayanam,
Rita Swastyayanam
dressed with auspicious garments and ornaments. Triptam, abhyanandat,
Abhyananda
he welcomed. Upagatam,
Bhagavatam
approached. Translation. The queen took her bath and dressed herself nicely with all auspicious garments and ornaments. After taking food and becoming completely satisfied, she returned to the king. Upon seeing her beautifully decorated, attractive face, the king welcomed her with all devotion. Purport. A woman is generally accustomed to dress herself nicely with fine garments and decorative ornaments. She may sometimes wear flowers in her hair. Women especially dress themselves up in the evening because the husband comes home in the evening after working hard all day. It is the duty of the wife to dress herself up very nicely so that when her husband returns home, he becomes attracted by her dress and cleanliness and thus becomes satisfied. In other words, the wife is the inspiration of all good intelligence. Upon seeing one's wife dressed nicely, one can think very soberly about family business. When a person is too anxious about family affairs, he cannot discharge his family duties nicely. A wife is therefore supposed to be an inspiration and to keep the husband's intelligence in good order so that they can combinedly prosecute the affairs of family life without impediment. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gnanjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadandikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagarjatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sapadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandha Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhi Vrindavaneshware Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Panchakalpatarubhyasta Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Let's say a few things about this purport or verse, but
Are we gonna do three?
I think so. There's a couple of things that just came to my mind while I was reading there that when we hear about Krishna's pastimes, we see that everyone very much was into dressing up, like for these, like Krishna's birthday or different festivals, the devotees would dress up quite a bit. Like they would put on their nicest and they would decorate themselves very nicely and so on. And the idea was for Krishna's pleasure. It's not just to attract one another to each other's bodies, but it's for the pleasure of the Lord to come before the Lord. It's a common thing of respect. If you come to a house of worship, a church, a synagogue, a temple, you don't show up in cutoffs and a raggy T-shirt or something. We're dressing for the Lord, and also we dress for one another. Like it creates a civilized mood. That we, we're not just slobs. Just whatever, slobbing around. And we care about the atmosphere that we create. So dressing properly, it serves a function. It serves a purpose to elevate the mood of culture and respect for one another. Conversely, the same dressing up could be for the wrong reason, just trying to attract people to our bodies or our whatever. And so there's a distinction here. The wife is dressing up to please the husband because we all need encouragement. It's a tough ride in the material world, and we have our attachments that we're gradually working through. But Ridananda Maharaj describes how if you're driving down the highway at 70 miles an hour and you suddenly realize you're going the wrong way, you can't immediately turn around. You have to first slow down, turn around, and then accelerate. So our attachment to the material world, we can't necessarily just give them up immediately, but we do need to progressively, untie the knot of attachment. So householder life it's a concession for those who are materially attached, and you do it in a civilized, respectful way. And gradually, we become purified. So this is part of the civilized way of a husband and wife living together, is that we understand that it gives inspiration to the husband that the wife is nicely decorated and so on. Because Ridananda Maharaj said, marriage is like the bullpen. When the bulls are whatever, when it's mating season or whatever, they have to keep the bulls, sort of secluded. Otherwise they'd go crazy over all the female cows. So marriage is like a bullpen. Men tend to want to, look at every woman that goes by and drool. So it's like, well, one wife, be a religious person. Sex life, which is not contrary to religious principles. Krishna says, I am that. It's a purificatory rite to raise a God-conscious child. So there is a civilized way to go about it. In San Diego, once Prabhupada, it was Govardhan Puja Festival. I don't know, were you there, Sandamini, when Prabhupada was there?
Yes.
So there's this, Prabhupada's giving this lecture, and it's outdoor. It's a big pandal. And there's, I wasn't there. I imagine there was a big crowd. And Prabhupada was speaking about Lord Chaitanya, and then some man yells out, some hippie in the audience goes, I want to have sex more than one time a month. Sure. You can hear it on the tape. And Prabhupada's like, what's he saying? And then one of the disciples said, he says he wants to have sex more than one time. And Prabhupada completely shifted gears, and he just started talking about, yes, be a responsible person, get married, and, but don't be an animal, So there's a civilized way to go about dealing with our material attachments. And as shocking as it may seem to us in our, degraded society that we live in today, it is possible. You see devotees who have been chaste in their marriages, and they maintain their Krishna conscious sadhana. They become very powerful. I mean, some of the most powerful preachers now are like grihastas who've stuck to their guns, as we say. They made a commitment, and some of them are the most powerful preachers, like Vaisheshika Prabhu, Kalakanta, You know, there's Bhurijan Prabhu. Like, these are very, and I remember I was in Mayapur back in 2012, and, you know, building up to Gaur Purnim, there's always, you know, it's like the sages of Naimisharanya. There's all these great devotees there. And I remember some of the most powerful classes were the Grihastas, you know. I mean, they were all wonderful, but I remember Bhakti Churu Maharaj was in the audience. Vaisheshika Prabhu was giving class. He just gave this amazing class. And Bhakti Churu Maharaj, who's no lightweight in his, and he's a very exalted personality. And he so humbly said, and, you know, when he, at the end of the class, and he asked for comments, questions, and Bhakti Churu Maharaj just so humbly said, we knew you were always serving Prabhupada, you know, in this most important service of book distribution. You know, we always knew you were doing that, but he didn't have, you know, necessarily as prominent a role or, you know, leadership, you know, back in the day. But then Bhakti Churu Maharaj says, but I can see that the cream has risen to the top. He says, you are the actual leader, you know, and it was so wonderful. It was like, this is real Vaishnavism, appreciation and respect and glorification of, you know, our God brothers and God sisters. So it's just this culture of respect and appreciation. This is, you know, part of what the Grihastha ashram is about, respecting one another, you know, and honoring one another as devotees of the Lord, and trying to encourage one another, and you know, not in an indulgent way, but we just recognize we have these material attachments, and men need certain things, women need certain things, and you just sort of play the game, you know. It's just, you don't get too wrapped out. Like, who was the Kurma Brahmin who wanted to run away with, you know, join Lord Chaitanya, and Lord Chaitanya said, don't be a crazy fellow, you know, just stay at home, keep Krishna within your heart, and just go through the motions of being a responsible son, and like that, you know. It's not like, it's not either or, that, you know, it's just dive deep into sense gratification, or, you know, or renounce. It's like Boga Tyag. Yes, Gunagraya Maharaj called me Boga Tyag Das, because it's out, you know, my bipolar nature. It's either, you know, 100% on or 100% off. You know, it'd be flip flopping. So he said, they gave you the wrong name. You should be Boga Tyag Das. Anyway, thoughts on these points that I brought up? Otherwise, I'm going to read the next verse. Yes, Prabhu.
The point you were making about creating like a nice atmosphere, dressing nicely and treating other people with nice respect, having some Vaishnava etiquette. Sometimes in order to put the main thing first, the chanting of the holy names, sometimes we circumvent culture and kind of maybe bring that in a little later. How important is like the culture of Krishna consciousness versus, you know, like the external manifestation, how we dress, how we interact, versus maybe what someone would call essence, which is the feeling and the chanting.
I think this Rupa Goswami addresses that, you know, in terms of principles and details. You know, the cultural aspects are supportive of the principle, but Rupa Goswami, I don't know the Sanskrits, you know, somehow or other think of Krishna. And Prabhupada demonstrated that when, you know, he first came. He recognized the cultural, you know, differences, and he didn't insist on immediately adopting all of the details. But the principle was chant Hare Krishna. Get them to chant Hare Krishna, take prasadam, hear. Most important is hearing. Hearing is, I mean, it's right there in the verse. Or Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaya. It's the very first thing. So that's really what, you know, the most important principle of any temple community or any kind of sangha. It's creating an environment where people can hear, like, and not be distracted. When Prabhupada, actually the Los Angeles temple, when they first got that temple, Prabhupada wanted them to keep the pews and and even keep the organ. Prabhupada even played the organ. And he saw it as, the first exposure that people have, because he understood that Western people, the deities are a little mind-blowing to most Western people. Let them come in and hear first. And he didn't want that to be the temple room. He wanted to keep it as like a lecture kirtan place, And I think it was Rita Anandaram. She was in India with Prabhupada, and they got a telegram. Prabhupada was in India, and then and Prabhupada specifically told them, keep the pews in there, and they can wear their shoes even, So talk about how important are the cultural details. If they impede the people's ability to come in here, then we jettison those, But it's time, place, circumstance. We have to use our intelligence to see what's most effective. But when Prabhupada he was in India, and Prabhupada got a telegram saying that they yanked the pews out of there, and Prabhupada took the telegram and went through it, Prabhupada was livid. He gave a specific order, and they disobeyed the order of the spiritual man. Yasya prasada bhagavat prasada, yasya prasada nagati. You think you got a better idea than your guru? It's, but Prabhupada, he said, well, you got to work with what you got. And, he just, okay, well, let's, they fixed the temple room up nicely and everything. Prabhupada came and, Hare Krishna, life goes on. But in retrospect, that should be the mood. Something like Yena can't, somehow or other get people to think of Krishna. And again, the hearing is the most significant. I heard a very interesting explanation Prabhupada gave about it was 1966, and he said the Hare Krishna mantra. He says, so some of my students have asked me to explain the Hare Krishna mantra. And Prabhupada said, it is just like this. Avatar. Avatar means one who comes from above to below, descends. So, and then Prabhupada gave this very interesting explanation. He said, just like from earth, you get wood. And from wood, you can first get some smoke, and then you can get fire. And from the fire, you can get the benefit, the energy. And he said, and that he was explaining, that was the Hare Krishna mantra. And I was trying to think, what's Prabhupada talking about, And here's somebody may have another angle on it. Here's my understanding. It's like Yasya Prabha Prabhavato Jagadandakoti in the Brahma Samhita say that the whole material manifestation it's Brahman, it's coming from the Brahma Jyoti. And that's Krishna's bodily effulgence. Ultimately, you were tracing it back to Krishna. But the energy that manifests the material cosmos is Krishna, it's Krishna's energy, it's Krishna's bodily effulgence. And then ultimately it's represented as the sun in the material world. There's a covering, the Vaikuntha world is illuminated by Krishna's bodily effulgence. So that because there's this cloud, this covering, so then the material world is dark. So then we got a light bulb hanging in there. It's called the sun. But that's the energy of the Brahma Jyoti, the sun. Now from the sun, when the sun is beaming down on the planet Earth, the plants and the trees, they absorb the sun's energy through photosynthesis. They convert that energy of the sun, which is ultimately Krishna's energy. it's converted to, by photosynthesis, then the plants and the trees, as they decompose and they, go underground, they become coal, and then they compress more, it becomes oil. And that's how we're like firing everything up, it's all coming from the sun. So Prabhupada was explaining, this is how like the holy name descends. It's coming, ultimately, avatar, the holy name is an avatar, it's descending from the spiritual world. But how does it manifest? Just like the deity appears to be wood or stone or metal or whatever, but Krishna is manifesting through. So it's just like that. Prabhupada was saying the fire, it's within the earth, and then it transforms into the wood, and then smoke, and then fire. Then it manifests. So it seems to be like, how is Krishna manifesting through the material elements? And Prabhupada said, if we've got the deity form, which is wood or metal or paint. So then you've got the sound form. But without Krishna's mercy, Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, it's just alphabets. If you're chanting and there's no divine descent, with the proper devotion, he said, it's like a capsule that has no medicine in it. It's just an empty. So it's just alphabet. Somebody's chanting the holy name, and if there's no bhakti, it's not the holy name. It may resemble it because you're saying the words, but it's not really the holy name. The holy name is manifest through, just like with, the Premanjana Charita Bhakti Vilotanena, how do we see the Lord? We see with the eyes of prema, of love. So without prema, Krishna doesn't appear, without bhakti. So and especially if we're chanting with offenses, there's no question that Krishna is going to manifest. We're chanting with offenses. And there's still some benefit in Namaparad, because Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that if you just chant with Namaparad, eventually a few Namabhasas will slip in there. And, like not purposefully chanting with offense. A few Namabhasas will slip in there. And those Namabhasas, they will accrue over time some bhakti, Mulo Sukriti, that piety. And then you'll eventually store up enough bhakti sukriti that you start to experience more of what the holy name actually is. But we've got to get out of that. And it's try to tie this back in with the whole thing of respect. Well, there's such an emphasis in Vedic culture and any culture of civilized culture of respect. Respect your parents, respect your elders, respect the demigods, respect the sages, honor, respect, because we're so bent on, the demoniac quality of pride, which is, it's actually the next verse. So I don't think I'm going to be able to, yeah, it's a little long, that purport, so maybe I won't go into it. But the next verse is talking about pramada, and in the purport, Prabhupada talks about the madness, and mada is in these 6 enemies of the mind: kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada. Mada is madness or pride. And what's the Lord Bhakti Siddhanta said, this thing about Siddha Pranali mantras, and the esoteric practice of bhakti that was prevalent prior, maybe up until Bhaktivinoda Thakur's time, where the guru would give you some revelation of your siddha deha, your spiritual form, and you would meditate, and there'd be different mantras given, but that was just kind of done away with, because not done away with, it's a legitimate practice, but given the contamination of Kali Yuga, just the holy name is the emphasis. It's not this Siddha Pranali meditation thing. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, our Siddha Pranali mantra is Trinadapi Sunichena Taroriva Sahishnana. Amanina, Manadena, respect for others. Seeing everyone, I quoted that on Sunday night, that, one who systematically sees everything in relation to the Supreme Lord, this Ishopanishad, sees everything in relation to the Supreme Lord, who sees all living entities as his parts and parcels, who sees the Supreme Lord within everything, never hates anything or any being. So it's such a, what do you call it? It's like the measuring stick. Like, are we making progress in Krishna consciousness? Are we harboring animosity toward any living being? It's even though we may, Prabhupada writes in Raghunath Bhatta, he was such an exalted personality. There's a verse that says, Raghunath Bhatta would not listen to blasphemy of a Vaishnava, nor would he listen to talk of a Vaishnava's misbehavior. He only saw that everyone was engaged in Krishna's service. He did not understand anything else. And Prabhupada in the purport says that this is the vision of the Mahabhagavad, that they see everyone as a servant of Krishna. Now in the purport, Prabhupada said, a Vaishnavacharya may sometimes criticize others for their edification, but Prabhupada said, if someone has not accepted you in a role of a student, where you're a teacher, guru, disciple, student, teacher, it's an offense to instruct somebody or to criticize someone. That's not our job. That's not in our job description as a living entity. You have the right to criticize others. It's only someone who is voluntarily entered into a relationship with us where they're asking, please correct me. Other than that, we got no business finding fault with anyone, whether they be conditioned souls, devotees. It's just not, it is completely against the culture of being a Vaishnava to criticize others. And Rupa Goswami says that, Nindadi shunya rituma ipsita sangalabhya. The highest devotee doesn't even have a propensity to criticize anybody. It's not like, oh, I got a bad thought about someone, I have to check that. No, they don't even have, it doesn't even arise. I mean, how wonderful would that be? That we never even have like ill feelings towards anyone, But that's the benchmark of real advancement in Krishna consciousness, is that we are feeling very humble that who was it when Ajamil was rescued by the Vishnu Dutas, as the Yamadutas were getting ready to yank him out of his body, and the Vishnu Dutas came and rescued him. There's a very wonderful purport where Ajamil's like, when he realized how he had been saved, he goes, alas, alas, I blew it. I had such a wonderful beginning of my life. I was trained, but I threw it all away, and I became a degraded, I'm connected with the prostitute, and he was stealing and doing all sorts of nefarious things. So he said, alas, what have I, what kind of person am I that I engaged in all these sinful activities, He was very repentant. And Prabhupada in the purport said, this is the beginning of one becoming a pure devotee. That one must repent for our past misbehavior. And in terms of eternal time, as Prabhupada said, Lord Brahma's lifetime of 311 trillion years is just a flash. So we take up devotional service maybe 5 months, 5 years, 50 years. It's practically yesterday. We were doing everything that we're so ready to criticize others, these, degraded, in our what do you call it, enthusiasm, karmis, although we don't hear it as much now, but I mean, it was like a dirty word, you karmi, or the fringies, we don't have that anymore, but that was the very, a very wonderful term that we used to, address devotees who weren't, fully, engaged in devotional service, and, maybe they were struggling with various, material attachments, or maybe they were just living outside the temple, being responsible, had a job. They were fringies, So, it's so that we really have no leg to stand on. Like if we really consider where we've come from and how we've been rescued by Prabhupada's mercy and his representatives, and it's so amazing. Because I live downtown, there's, well, not just downtown, but there's homeless people all around, but there's a certain area where there's a lot of homeless people downtown, and I'll go for walks sometimes, and I started doing this thing where I bring, I got these butterscotch candies, and I offer them to the Lord, and I distribute prasad, and Prabhupada said it was legit. You could have lollipops and offer them to the deities. So I go out, and I, usually the homeless people are a little humbler, and don't take candy from a stranger. It's sort of like, who's this guy walking up with butterscotch? But the homeless people, they're so like out of it that, yeah, butterscotch, cool, So I was near some of the government buildings downtown, and there's a plaza, and I was chanting, and, I had my pocket full of butterscotch candies. And I was walking kind of slowly by this one guy. He wasn't totally disheveled, but he was fairly disheveled. And I was kind of walking by, and I kind of looked at him, and I said, hey, I kind of gauge them, whether or not I can approach them, and if they're too mentally deranged, I stay away from them. So I was kind of looking at him, and he's looking at me, and he goes, so what's your deal? Like, what are you all about? And it just kind of took me back, and I just thought, well, I'm just going to answer him. He says, well, I'm trying to be of service to others. And he looks at me and he says, well, that's bhakti yoga. And I was like, what? This homeless guy, he goes, well, that's bhakti yoga. And I said, yeah, I don't know if he noticed my beads that I had in my. And then he started saying, yeah, there's Dharma, and, the Buddhists say this and that, and then I said, I mentioned that, I was connected with the Hare Krishna movement. He says, oh yeah, Prabhupada, yeah, I read Science of Self-Realization. And here's this guy that you think, who are these people? And then I sat down, and he pulled out a mandolin, he played me a song, and it was just fun. And then he took some, prasadam, and I bid him farewell, and I just thought, wow, you never know, like, who's out there. And then I was in another area by Armory Park. You guys were just there for the Peace Fair. So there's a bus stop there, and there was a couple of homeless people there. So I was walking up, and man and a woman, and they're laying on the grass, and I just whipped out the butterscotch, and they gladly accepted. And as I gave him the butterscotch, I said, Hare Krishna. And the guy goes, Hare Krishna? And he stands up, he pulls up his shirt. He's got a tattoo of Krishna on his chest. And he says, oh yeah, I was hanging out with the devotees here and there, and I've this and that, and I haven't been to the temple in a long time. I should come some, but so you never know, like, we can so easily judge a book by its cover, like, who are these people, and like Python Man or Ritrasur, we don't know, everybody's a part and parcel of Krishna. Everybody's a devotee of Krishna. They're just not necessarily acting on that, but they are worthy of respect. And, Prabhupada said, you don't embrace a tiger, you respect it from a distance. So, we don't sentimentally engage with everyone, we use our power of discrimination to appropriately honor people. But, one of the biggest turnoffs, in terms of in attracting people to Krishna consciousness, if we think we're better than others, people are not that dumb. They can sense, and we may wax eloquent philosophy, but if we have condescension in our consciousness, people feel that. We're not fooling anybody. And this is the age of quarrel and hypocrisy. So religious hypocrisy is one of the biggest problems, and because we have such high ideals, and we can speak about the ideals, but if we're not living the ideals, there's no real potency behind what we say, And this is the whole point of the parampara, is that, there's that verse in the 10th canto that says that glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is performed the parampara system, that it is conveyed from spiritual master to disciple. So that's glorification. It's like the medicine, but for someone who's still interested in enjoyment in the material world, they won't have a taste, We can put on a show, Prabhupada writes, people like to be honored for being a religious person, all pious, But Krishna, Krishna says, of gamblers, I'm cheat. You can't cheat Krishna. You can fool some of the people some of the time, all the people, whatever, how that goes. But you can never fool Krishna. And Krishna, if we're maintaining material attachments, Krishna, and we're chanting Hare Krishna, you may get material, pious benefit. You won't get Krishna. You may be honored as a great religious person, But it's this humbleness, this repentant mood. Who am I? I was picked up out of the gutter, by my spiritual master. Let me never forget that. Let me always be at the feet, of my guru, and just be an instrument of Lord Chaitanya's mercy. And Patita Pavana Hitu Tab Avatar, Lord Chaitanya has come to deliver the most fallen. Narottam Das Thakur said, if you look around, you won't find any more fallen than me. So I'm first, me first. That's the mood of advanced devotee. Krishnadas Kaviraj said that the symptom that one has love of God is that he doesn't think he has even a drop of it. So, these are, sobering topics, so to speak, but it's when we have this humility that Lord Chaitanya said, Krishnadas Kaviraj said, you string that verse, Trinadapi Sunichina, around your neck on the thread of the holy name and wear it constantly. Then we can actually chant Hare Krishna properly, and then get the benefit of Krishna Prema. All right? Any more thoughts or realizations? Somebody, please. Yes, Chris.
So you were saying that we should respect everyone and not criticize, unless we've made an agreement as a teacher and a student. So what about within the association of Vaishnavas? Is there also some kind of agreement that we're helping each other, we're helping raise each other out of ignorance? And so it's okay if we're discussing as peers, bring up problems that we have, that we've observed.
Yeah, there's etiquette. That's one of the ornaments of a Vaishnava, is that we observe etiquette, and there should always be respect. But there's the etiquette when someone is in a senior position, unless you're in like a position of leadership where you're sort of been christened by the parampara of correcting a senior. Like if you're in a position of leadership and there's a devotee that's senior to you, you may have to instruct that senior. But that's because you, in a sense, you've been empowered by the parampara to be in that, you've been given that service. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, some disciples were complaining about some of their god brothers, they had these faults in this land. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, I have the thankless task of having to criticize others, because he's the guru, the acharya. Like I don't want to do that because that's against the nature of a Vaishnava. But I'm doing it because I'm a servant of my guru, and my guru has told me to train these people, so I have to point out their discrepancies as their servant. Not that I'm superior. A guru never thinks he's a guru. He thinks I'm just a servant of my guru, and my guru has told me to do this service to train these other devotees, but I'm not better than them. I'm just a servant of my guru. So, but in terms of, they used to call ishtagosis like gripe sessions, like we just, bring out all the dirty laundry, like this is a problem, that's a problem. And they only become, it's when this atmosphere, there's a story of, it's a famous story in many different traditions. Maybe this will help. There was a monastery that used to be flourishing in some beautiful country setting. Used to be flourishing, but it had gotten, in time it went on, there was only like 4 monks left. And they were getting a little worried, like we're totally drying up here. And there was some rabbi in some cottage out in the forest. So the what do you call the head monk guys at the monasteries? The abbot?
That sounds about right.
The abbot, they were talking, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? We're drying up here. So then he said, well, there's that rabbi who goes out and meditates or let me go meet with him. So he went out and he's talking with them, and they were sort of commiserating. Yeah, times have changed. We're struggling too at the, whatever you call the Jewish version of a monastery. Yeah, times are tough. And he says, well, can you give me what do you think? How are we going to and he says, well, I don't really know, but I can tell you this. The Messiah is amongst you. And the abbot was kind of, the Messiah is amongst you. I said, okay, thanks, And then he went back, and the other monks were like, what did he say? What did he say? He says, I don't know. He just said the Messiah is amongst you. So they're all kind of scratching their head. What does that mean? So then they're thinking, the Messiah is amongst you. Maybe it's Brother John. He's got his quirks, but he is very learned in the scriptures. I wonder if it's him. And then there's Brother Thomas. He's always willing to do things forever, but he's got his weird hang up. But maybe he's the Messiah. And so he's gone to the 4. We're all thinking, I'm not sure, maybe I better be, maybe. And so they started being very respectful towards one another. And the atmosphere that was created was so attractive. There was some young people were hiking in the forest or whatever, and they saw this monastery, and they came and they met the monks, and this atmosphere where they were all respectful towards one another, they were like, wow, this is kind of far out, and they became interested, and then they eventually joined. And in other words, the whole idea was with an attitude of respect, that this whole thing about criticism and finding fault and so on, it's simply, when we're not folk, Prabhupada said, you're missing the point. The whole point is to love Krishna. By loving Krishna, you will automatically love all living entities. So if we're not developing our love for Krishna, then we will not appreciate others, you know, and we will see their shortcomings. And Vaisheshika Prabhu was saying, Raghunath Bhatta's program, he opted out of criticism completely. He said, I will not hear blasphemy of a Vaishnava or listen to any talk of a Vaishnava's misbehavior, even if they're at fault. I don't want to hear it. Unless you're in a position of leadership or guru and you have to deal with these things. But if that's not in your job description, you can totally opt out. I'm not going to criticize. And I'll add, I'm going to go on a news fast. Stay away from that garbage, political garbage. It's all criticism and it's toxic. Martin Luther King said, you know, I have a dream that someday my children will live in a world where they'll be judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. So what's the content of your character? It's what you're pouring into you. That's your content. If we're listening to all this toxic sound vibration that's just proliferated in society now, it's contaminating. It's poison. And it will be just like with the, you know, some of the dubious practices, you know, when we were, you know, the change up and the, you know, selling records in the name of saying, you know, it was all this dishonesty. And then eventually the devotees just brought it home and they just started being dishonest with one another and cheating one another. So it's very contaminating, you know, when we hear criticism. Even if it's, you could say, legitimate in the sense, you know, there is, I mean, Prabhupada certainly was critical of, but it was because Prabhupada cared about them. He didn't want people to be misled by these bogus political leaders and that. But just from my own personal experience, I'm not saying, you know, everybody should do what I do, but it's been such a relief to keep my nose out of the news. You know, it's just toxic. And then, as I was giving the Sunday Feast talk last Sunday, I thought, I haven't listened to the news for a couple of months. Maybe I should hear something about what's going on. And I just picked up, you know, Google News, and I thought, I'll just breeze through the headlines. I almost vomited. It was just like, oh, God. And I just forget it. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. It's just toxic. It's poison. And, you know, and we're surprised that we don't have wonderful, loving relationships with one another, or we're not tasting the nectar of the holy name. We're committing offenses, not just to devotees, but if we have just a horrible attitude towards the conditioned souls who are, rightfully, they're engaging in abominable activities. But who wasn't amongst us, you know? So Ajamia was saying, you know, like I really can't be so quick to judge others because I was doing that not so long ago. Whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years ago, you know, we're not so, you know, we're not so exalted that we have a license to condemn anybody, you know. Is that what do you think, Divya Singha? Okay.
There's a quote too on the politics part I read the other day. Prabhupada said, "Stay out of politics. We are culture and philosophy." That's our department.
It's not even politics anymore. It's just it's like a football game, you know. It's just team, you know, it's just teams of people throwing mud at one another. I mean, they even used to call it that, mudslinging. It's just people, and the thing is, don't be so naive. It's just a game. It's called political grandstanding. It's a performance. These people, they go out to the bar and drink together, you know, after they rail on one another in some congressional meeting. they go off to the bar and they drink together and say, hey, good shot. That was a good one, you know. Because you keep the people divided. It's called divide and conquer. It's like manipulation 101. You keep people at each other's throats so they won't challenge your power. They're too busy fighting with one another and hating one another. And meanwhile, the politicians have got their hands in your back pocket and they're stealing all your money via taxes and so on. And we're all like, you know, oh, the issues, you know, and, you know, it's like we're just being duped by Maya. So it's just, again, I'm going to tell you how to live your life, but I can just say for myself, it's just like, oh man, what a relief to not listen to all that negative, you know. And maybe, you know, maybe if your service, I don't know, if your service requires it and, you know, but, you know, like I said, I was trying to think, well, maybe, you know, I try to make my presentation relevant. I should know what's going on in the world, but it's just like, read the Bhagavatam. There's all sorts of political intrigue. If you like political intrigue, read the Bhagavatam, read Mahabharata. There's all sorts of political intrigue, if that's your rasa. But Krishna's there. Great devotees are there. You're getting purified by hearing about the political intrigue that's going on, you know. That, you know, dovetail your propensity. If you like politics, then read about the politics, you know, of the Mahabharata and become purified rather than putrefied. So, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai.